Welcome to week 4, our online session. We have two topics we're going to blend together this week. E-procurement using some separate readings, and then the use of specifications, which comes from chapter 6. So let me give you a little bit of an overview so you know what to kind of expect as we head into this. Keep in mind the 5-step procurement process that we've talked about previously. When we talk about first specifications, those specifications are critical here in the requirements area because the specifications provide us with a description of what it is we're going to buy, which is also the definition of what we call the requirements. And specifications can run a broad range from being a very catalog type specification where we might have a part number, which is very specific in its own way, compared to a very specific drawing of an item that we need to have custom made. So specifications, though, regardless, describe in such a way that when we source it, we can identify companies that can realistically provide that item, and also from a bidding standpoint to ensure that when the bids come back, they're all priced and considered based on the same item. Now, I've used the term item just because it's often simpler to talk about the specification of an item, because we can often think about describing a table or a chair and its height and width and depth and the material it's made out of. But specifications are even more important when it comes to services. We'll have a little bit separate discussion further down the line when it comes to services, and we'll use the term statement of work as what we use to specify or describe services. So for this chapter, it's better for us to stay focused on physical goods that we're buying as opposed to services. The other item, language-wise, to keep in mind is what we say standardization versus specialization. It's somewhat of a continuum. It's not exactly black and white. Standardization would lean us toward having that specific item number, catalog number, where we'd say, oh, we need a 12-volt motor with this weight characteristics made of this type of material, and that happens to be GE part number 116532. And the expectation is that we would have multiple distributors that could potentially sell us that exact motor with that exact part number. Then we would have to determine as a group, as a procurement group working with our internal customer, whether we're going to allow that suppliers to also say, well, there are other manufacturers of that same described motor, and it's not GE part number, it's another company's part number, and would you consider what we would call alternates? So that has to be determined up front, whether we're going to allow suppliers to bid alternates or whether they must bid the standard product described. When we move across the spectrum to specialization, that's really where we're talking about those custom type items where we're going to need to provide an engineering drawing or something that describes it in such a way that the supplier would be able to create that item. And clearly in procurement, that's going to make a much more difficult situation to compare suppliers when they may have different approaches to creating that same designed item. And we flip over to the other side of our topics for this week, and that's the use of technology in the procurement process. So sometimes the term e-business is used, sometimes it's e-commerce, sometimes it's e-procurement. E-procurement is the most specific because that's technology used specifically to enable some aspect of those 5 steps in the procurement process. So don't get hung up just on the bidding, because that's where reverse auctions occur and they're really exciting and there's a lot of work done on those. But we can also use technology in those other parts of it, and with the goal to either make that process more effective, so to gather better information, or to make it more efficient where we can complete that step in less time at lower cost. So whatever our technology application is, our goal is to enhance that 5-step process in some way. And we'll talk about those a little bit more in just a moment. E-commerce is a more general term, and that's anytime technology is used in the sale of a product. So certainly e-procurement would fit under that because companies are selling us their product using electronic methods, whether that's websites, EDI, and other things. E-business is the most general term, and that's technology used in any way in business. So not necessarily procurement, not necessarily in transactions between companies. So it goes from least specific to most specific. There's a Chatterjee article which I didn't require you to read, but I want to give you a couple highlights from it. It's a research piece, so it's probably 35 pages. But Chatterjee brought out some interesting points about the use of technology by companies, and that potentially a company having expertise in using technology in their procurement process could be a distinctive competency or something that turns into a competitive advantage where they're able to procure their inputs at a better value, faster, more efficiently, more effectively than their competitors. So it can be quite the value creator. This term electronic partnering will come out through the chapter as well, or you'll see this some other places. That means where this is after the award decision, where we have decided we'll have some type of relationship with the supplier. Having an electronic relationship can enhance that and allow us to share information more quickly, improve transparency, create as you see on the next bullet, a tighter coupling between us. There's more of a link, and it's an ongoing link where information is flowing as needed. So loosely coupled means we have a relationship and we might have a special login for their website, which I would say would be fairly loose. Whereas a tightly coupled, they may create custom applications for us and for our people to use on their phones even as an app so that they can check the status of their deliveries and things like that. So tightly coupled meaning more unique, and we talked about that term as an asset, a specific asset. So tightly coupled starts to look like a specific asset, something that's created for that relationship that wouldn't have value in other relationships. Little side note there on Walmart's Retail Link, that is a tightly coupled tool that if you sell product to Walmart, which hey, if you do, that's great. Retail Link is their access to their system. It's a web-based technology. In fact, you can go in right now and type in Retail Link at Walmart and the login will come up, but you don't probably have a password and access to it. But they require all their suppliers to use that, and it's electronic partnering example, and they force you every time they want to order something from you, it will come through Retail Link. And anytime you want to invoice them, you send it through Retail Link. If you want to check the inventory of your product at any of their stores and warehouses, you do it through Retail Link. So it is a required coupling that you'll use if you're ever dealing with Walmart. So it's just a good example. What are the barriers? How do we get over them? I hope you're starting to think, hey, that can be a little problem if I'm a smaller supplier. That might be a lot of information for me to deal with. And if I'm a big supplier, why would I want to use a custom thing just to deal with Walmart when I've got my own system that handles all that? So there's some challenges, some costs of doing business through something like a Retail Link. And if you don't have something like a Retail Link, then there's a cost to creating that electronic relationship. And you might need some critical mass before you're able to really invest in that. Now this is where this technology spreads across those 5 steps of procurement a little bit more. So keep that in mind. When I'm searching for a product, I can go out and use Google. I can use some specific search tools that work just for procurement professionals. I can send out my bids electronically as spreadsheets and Word documents and PDFs and have those returned to me using that same method, so I eliminate all those time lags of sending things out by mail. I can award my purchase order electronically. I can send it electronically, save all that filing. And then keep in mind, we talked about that transaction cost economics, which means that there's a cost anytime you deal outside of your organization. And volume affects that, the type of contract or governance affects that, asset specificity affects that, monitoring affects that, opportunism affects that. And I'm asking you to now think about, okay, if I use technology, how would that impact those transaction costs? Would it lower all of them, some of them? Would it increase some? What is that impact of technology on transaction costs? So we're starting to pull some of these pieces together. This is some of those functions that can affect bidding. I use the term information gathering. That's really sourcing. Transacting might be part of the award process, or it might also be part of the contract management. So So think about all the different ways technology. The articles I've provided to you focus in more specifically on reverse auctions because they are complicated animals, but don't lose sight that there are other ways that technology are used. Quick note on reverse auctions. I have used those in a procurement realm. In fact, I was probably one of the early adopters on that in the early to mid 90s. They are backward. So normally when you go to an auction, the auctioneer lifts up an item, or if we do that on eBay, an item is put up for auction, and each of the prospective customers of that will bid. I'll give you $1 for it. I'll give you $2 for it. And the bids go higher and higher. We call it a reverse auction because when we do a bid through this, we'll put up the bid package, which has to be very carefully defined so that all the bidders know exactly what they're bidding on. And then the bidders usually start high, and then the next bidder will say, I'll do it for 800, and then another bidder might come in and say, I'll do it for 750, 700. So it is a reverse auction because the bids actually go down over time. It is an online event. There is usually a very tight window of time that this auction occurs. It might be 2 days or 3 days, or it might be an afternoon from noon to 4. They are a very interesting animal. Not everything is well suited for an auction environment, but it's certainly a way to create an environment of competitiveness and some excitement that might stimulate your bidders to be more competitive and give you lower pricing. But it doesn't work for everything. Watch for that as you go through those articles. And also, that bidding software is normally something you pay for. You might pay an annual licensing fee, or they may provide that platform and they'll say, okay, what did you pay for that purchase last time? We're going to take a certain percentage of how much lower you buy it for this time. So we're going to take part of that benefit that you get. So something can be done as a percentage type thing. So that's the big items we're going to touch on. It's some neat topics. It's something very current, even though reverse auction started in the 90s. There's still something that organizations are trying to figure out how to best make use of those in their procurement process, and certainly technology overall. So dig in on that. Take a look at the weekly materials guide. It'll give you a written description of what's going on, and then the online calendar overview will give you the flow chart explaining when those due dates are going to be. So good luck with the material, and I'll see you on the discussion board.